The message appeared on my wife's phone at 2:13 in the morning, glowing against the dark bedroom like somebody had struck a match beside my face. I can still taste you. Delete this when you wake up. I had not been snooping. That is the part people always question first, as if betrayal only counts when you discover it politely. Vanessa had fallen asleep with her phone resting on my side of the bed while she was charging it, and the vibration against the wooden nightstand woke me. I reached for it because I thought it might be an emergency from her mother, who had been having blood pressure problems, but instead I saw the name Eli Studio above those words. My hand stopped halfway between the nightstand and the mattress. For several seconds, I stared at the screen while Vanessa breathed slowly beside me, one arm tucked under her pillow, her face completely peaceful. My wife looked innocent when she slept. That almost made it worse. I was 37 years old, she was 46, and we had been married for 8 years. I had believed I knew every version of her face, the irritated one she wore in traffic on the Bay Bridge, the soft one she showed when she called her father on Sundays, the tired one she carried home after long days managing a high-end furniture showroom near Union Square. But that night, I realized there was an expression I had never seen because she only wore it when I was not around. The screen dimmed before I moved. I tapped it again, and another preview appeared beneath the first. Thursday was worth the wait. Next time, stay longer. My heart did not pound the way people describe in movies. It seemed to lose its rhythm entirely, beating once, then pausing too long, then striking hard enough to make my throat pulse. My mouth filled with a metallic taste. I looked at Vanessa, then back at the phone, and for one reckless second I wanted to wake her by throwing it against the wall. I wanted to demand a name, a place, an explanation. Instead, I quietly lifted the phone and carried it into the bathroom. Now, I want you to imagine that walk. 10 steps across a bedroom you have slept in for years can feel longer than an entire highway when you know the life waiting behind you may already be over. Vanessa had changed her passcode 3 months earlier. She told me it was because someone at work had watched her unlock it during a client meeting. I had believed her because trust makes intelligent people accept explanations they would tear apart if they belonged to someone else. But Vanessa had used the same 4-digit code for our home alarm, and when I entered it, the phone opened. The conversation with Eli Studio went back almost 7 months. I scrolled carefully, photographing everything with my own phone, and each movement of my thumb removed another piece of the marriage I thought I had. There were hotel names in Oakland and Daly City, restaurant reservations she had claimed were work dinners, photographs that made my stomach clench, and voice messages I did not have the courage to play with her sleeping 20 feet away. He called her beautiful. She called him her escape. She told him I was dependable but predictable, a sentence so casual that it hurt more than the explicit messages. Apparently, paying the mortgage on time, remembering her father's birthday, fixing the loose cabinet hinges, and sitting beside her through 2 miscarriages had been reduced to predictability. Then I found a photo of him. He was standing in front of a painted brick wall, wearing a black denim jacket and holding a camera. He looked young. Not young compared to me. Young compared to both of us. I opened his profile through a link Vanessa had sent and found his real name, Elijah Mercer. 21 years old. A freelance photographer who rented studio space in the Mission District. Vanessa was 46. The difference between them was 25 years. I sat on the closed toilet lid and stared at his birth year until the numbers blurred. He was young enough to have been her son. She had joked before about women her age chasing boys. She had called it embarrassing, desperate, almost predatory. Yet there she was, sending him hotel room selfies and messages about how he made her feel alive. Let me pause here, because this was the moment anger turned into something colder. Finding out your wife is cheating is one wound. Finding out she has built the affair around a version of herself she once mocked in other women is another. It tells you the person beside you does not merely lie to you. She lies to herself so completely that she can live inside the contradiction without choking on it. I copied the entire message thread to a secure folder, photographed his profile, saved dates, addresses, receipts, and every reference to money. That last part mattered because I noticed Vanessa had paid for nearly everything. Hotel rooms, dinners, camera equipment. A $2,800 lens she had told me was a professional development expense for her showroom's marketing department. She had even transferred him $6,000 over 4 months in payments labeled consulting. We did not have children, and our finances were partly separate, but the home, savings account, and investment portfolio were shared. I understood immediately that confronting her without preparation would be emotional suicide and financial stupidity. So I put the phone exactly where I had found it, returned to bed, and lay beside her until sunrise without closing my eyes. At 6:30, Vanessa stretched, kissed my shoulder, and asked why I looked tired. I told her I had been thinking about a difficult construction estimate. I owned a small structural inspection company that worked on older apartment buildings throughout San Francisco, and difficult estimates were common enough that she accepted the answer without hesitation. "Try not to carry everything in your head," she said, smiling as she walked toward the bathroom. That sentence almost made me laugh. Instead, I made coffee. For the next 12 days, I behaved like the husband she believed she had successfully deceived. I asked about her work. I cooked salmon on Tuesday. I watched a documentary with her on Wednesday while she messaged Elijah beneath a blanket. On Thursday, she said a designer from Los Angeles was visiting and the showroom team would probably stay late. I kissed her goodbye and said, "Don't worry about dinner." Then I followed her. Not closely. I had inspected enough buildings and worked with enough insurance investigators to understand that amateur surveillance fails because hurt people become impatient. I rented a gray Toyota through an app, left my own truck at the office, and parked 2 blocks from the showroom. At 6:18, Vanessa exited through the side entrance wearing a cream-colored coat I had bought her for our anniversary. She walked toward Geary Street, checked her reflection in a dark storefront window, and climbed into a red Honda Civic driven by Elijah. Seeing him in person shocked me in a way his photograph had not. He looked even younger behind the wheel. Thin face, nervous shoulders, baseball cap turned backward. Vanessa leaned across the center console and kissed him before he pulled away. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, but I did not follow immediately. I waited until 2 cars passed, then joined traffic. They drove across town to a boutique hotel near Japantown. I parked where I could see the entrance and took photographs of them walking inside together. Vanessa touched the back of his neck as they crossed the lobby. It was an intimate gesture, practiced rather than spontaneous. That told me this was not a mistake, not a brief lapse, not something she would later describe as confusion. It was a relationship. I stayed for 40 minutes, then drove home because I already had what I needed. When she returned after 11, she smelled like unfamiliar soap and the citrus perfume she only wore for important occasions. "The client wouldn't stop talking," she said, dropping her handbag onto the chair. "I thought I'd never get out of there." "Did the meeting go well?" I asked. "Very well." She smiled while lying directly into my face. If you have ever wondered how a person can sit calmly across from someone who has betrayed them, the answer is that sometimes rage becomes so complete it stops looking like rage. Mine became organization. The following morning, I contacted a divorce attorney named Marlene Cho whose firm had handled a contract dispute for one of my clients. I did not call from home. I sat in my truck beside Crissy Field, watching fog cover the Golden Gate Bridge while I explained that my wife was having an affair, spending money on her lover, and possibly misusing marital funds. Marlene listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Do not confront her. Do not move large amounts of money. Do not threaten either of them. Gather records legally, change passwords on accounts that are solely yours, and let me see everything." Her calm voice gave structure to the chaos. Over the next week, I downloaded bank statements, copied tax returns, documented valuable property, and opened a new account for future income. I learned that Vanessa had withdrawn nearly $18,000 from our joint savings over 7 months, always in amounts small enough that I had overlooked them among business expenses and household payments. Some of that money had gone toward Elijah's equipment. Some had paid his rent. One transfer included the note, "For our future." I read those 3 words several times. Our future. She was financing a 21-year-old man with money we had saved for a larger home. I asked Marlene what would happen if Vanessa tried to drain the rest. She filed the necessary preliminary paperwork and advised me on how to preserve the account without violating California law. Everything had to be exact. That became my discipline. I did not want a screaming match. I did not want revenge that lasted one evening and left me exposed the next morning. I wanted Vanessa to continue walking through her secret life until every exit quietly locked behind her. What I did not know yet was that Elijah was lying to her too, and the secret he carried was far more dangerous than anything hidden in their messages. But before I discovered that, I found something inside our home that proved Vanessa was not merely planning to leave me. She was preparing to make sure I paid for the life she intended to build after I was gone. I found it on a rainy Tuesday while looking for a spare set of property tax records. Our filing cabinet had always been divided into 2 sections. The left drawer held everything we both used: insurance papers, utility bills, mortgage statements. The right drawer belonged mostly to Vanessa. I had never cared enough to dig through it because marriage had always meant trust to me, not supervision. But Marlene had asked me to document every significant financial record before anything disappeared, so I opened the second drawer and began sorting folders one by one. Halfway through, a plain manila envelope slid onto the floor. It wasn't labeled. Inside was a printed apartment listing in the Marina District. 2 bedrooms. Newly renovated. Rent, $5,900 a month. The application wasn't blank. Vanessa had already filled in her personal information. Under "Additional Occupant," someone had typed, "Elijah Mercer." I kept reading. Estimated move-in date, 6 weeks away. My name appeared only once, under the section asking whether the applicant currently owned property. Vanessa had written, "Joint homeowner. Divorce proceedings expected." She had planned my future before I even knew my marriage was ending. For a long time I simply sat there on the office floor holding those papers. The rain tapped steadily against the living room windows while the house remained completely silent. Strange how betrayal changes ordinary sounds. The same rain that had always made our home feel peaceful suddenly felt like someone counting down towards something inevitable. I photographed every page and returned everything exactly where I had found it. Nothing could look disturbed. Nothing could warn her. That evening Vanessa came home smiling. "Guess what?" she said while hanging her coat. "Corporate might send me to New York in the fall." "That sounds exciting," I answered. She walked over and kissed my cheek. Her lipstick left the faintest mark against my skin. 20 minutes earlier she had texted Elijah, "Can't stop thinking about tonight." I already knew because her cloud backup was quietly syncing to the tablet she had forgotten was still connected to our shared family account. She had changed her phone password. She had forgotten about the tablet sitting inside the cabinet beside our television. Every message continued appearing there automatically. Technology is funny sometimes. The smallest oversight can destroy the biggest lie. Let me stop here for a second. People often ask why someone being betrayed keeps collecting evidence instead of confronting immediately. The answer is simple. Liars prepare stories long before honest people prepare questions. If I had confronted Vanessa after that first night, she would have cried, blamed stress, deleted everything, and started rewriting history. Every day I stayed quiet was another day she handed me proof with her own fingers. 3 days later I learned something else. Elijah wasn't just accepting Vanessa's money. He was asking for more. I watched a conversation unfold in real time through the sync tablet while eating lunch inside my truck outside a construction site in Pacific Heights. "The landlord needs another deposit," he wrote. Can you help? Vanessa answered within 2 minutes. I'll transfer it tonight. Mark won't notice. Seeing my own name inside their messages produced a different kind of pain. I wasn't a husband there. I wasn't even a person. I was simply an obstacle to be managed. That night, after Vanessa fell asleep, I reviewed months of financial transfers. Nearly every payment she had sent matched some request from Elijah within 24 hours. Camera bodies. Editing software. Travel expenses. Rent. Even dental bills. She wasn't having an affair. She was financing another man's entire lifestyle. The attorney smiled when I placed the printed records across her conference table. This helps considerably, Marlene said. California isn't an at-fault divorce state, but dissipation of marital assets absolutely matters when one spouse uses shared resources for an affair. She organized everything into neat folders while explaining each step of the legal process. I realized something then. Revenge wasn't going to be loud. Revenge was going to be paperwork. Deadlines. Court filings. Bank records. Every boring little document Vanessa had ignored her entire adult life was about to become the sharpest weapon I'd ever held. Weeks passed. I maintained the performance. We attended her cousin's birthday dinner together. We smiled for photographs. She squeezed my hand whenever someone complimented us for being such a stable couple. Every compliment made her thank them with the same practiced smile. Looking back now, I honestly wonder whether she believed her own performance. Or maybe she had repeated the lies so many times that it felt real. Then something happened that neither she nor I expected. My younger sister Emily called me one Saturday afternoon. Mark, she said carefully, can I ask you something without you getting mad? Depends what it is. She hesitated. Have you and Vanessa separated? Every muscle in my back tightened. No. Why? Because I saw her yesterday at the Ferry Building. She was holding hands with a college-aged guy. I closed my eyes. Describe him. Emily did. Baseball cap. Camera bag. Tall. Thin. 20-something. Exactly who I expected. I thought maybe he was a nephew or something, she continued. But, they kissed. Thank you for telling me. Mark, are you okay? I looked across the bay where sailboats drifted lazily beneath an unusually clear sky. Not really, I admitted. But I will be. Emily didn't press for details. She simply said, whatever's happening, I'm on your side. Those words stayed with me for days. Betrayal isolates you because you begin questioning your own judgment. Every person who quietly says, I believe you, helps pull you back toward reality. A week later the first crack appeared between Vanessa and Elijah. Their messages became tense. He canceled plans repeatedly. He claimed he was sick. Vanessa accused him of avoiding her. Finally she demanded to know what was going on. His reply was short. Just stressed. I'll explain soon. Instead of comforting him, she sent another $2,000. Money had become the language of their relationship. If you've ever watched two dishonest people build a life together, here's something I've learned. Eventually they begin lying to each other with the same ease they once lied to everyone else. Neither of them knows how to build trust because deception is the foundation holding everything up. I hired a licensed investigator at Marlene's recommendation, not to stalk them illegally, but to verify addresses, timelines, and financial facts that might later matter in court. 4 days later he called me. I found something unusual, he said. It's probably nothing, but you should know. He explained that Elijah had abruptly stopped working with several photography clients months earlier. There were rumors inside the local creative community that he'd experienced serious health issues, though nobody seemed to know exactly what. Medical records were obviously private, and the investigator couldn't access them. Neither could I. I thanked him anyway and filed the information away without giving it much thought. At the time it seemed irrelevant. I was focused on protecting my assets and ending my marriage with as little chaos as possible. I had no idea that the unanswered questions surrounding Elijah's health would soon become the center of everything. The answer would arrive not from an investigator, not from a lawyer, but from someone who had loved Elijah long before Vanessa ever entered his life, and when she finally knocked on my office door, carrying a folder in trembling hands, I realized the nightmare was even bigger than I had imagined. She arrived at my office just after 4 in the afternoon. The receptionist buzzed my phone and said, "There's a woman here asking for you. She says it's personal. I don't know anyone who should be coming here. She said if you hear the name Claire, you'll want to speak with her." I almost told the receptionist to send her away. Then something in my gut stopped me. "Bring her in." A woman in her early 50s stepped through the doorway carrying a worn leather folder against her chest. She looked exhausted, the kind of exhausted that comes from months of sleeping only a few hours each night. "You must be Mark," she said quietly. "I am. My name is Claire." She swallowed hard before continuing. "I'm Elijah's mother." For several seconds neither of us spoke. She looked around my office, noticed the family photograph of Vanessa and me that I still hadn't taken down, then lowered her eyes. "I know who your wife is." Those 6 words immediately erased any hope that this meeting was some misunderstanding. I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. She sat carefully, keeping both hands on the folder as though letting go of it would cause everything inside to spill into the room. "I've gone back and forth for weeks about whether I should find you," she admitted. "I almost convinced myself it wasn't my place." "What changed?" She looked directly into my eyes. I realized another innocent person was being lied to. Let me pause here. There are moments in life when you can actually feel the direction of your future changing. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like the instant a train switches tracks. I knew whatever Claire was about to tell me would change everything. She slowly opened the folder. "I can't give you my son's medical records," she said. "They're private, and despite everything, he's still my son." I nodded. "I understand. But I can tell you what I know." She took a long breath. "Elijah was diagnosed HIV positive a little over 2 years ago." The room became perfectly silent. I didn't interrupt. "He received treatment," she continued. "At first he took it seriously. Then he started skipping appointments." She wiped tears from beneath one eye. "He stopped taking his medication regularly about 8 months ago." 8 months. Around the same time the affair had started. "I begged him," she whispered. "I begged him not to date until he became responsible again. He promised me he wasn't seeing anyone." She looked at the wedding ring still on my finger. "He lied." I leaned back in my chair. Every emotion I had carried for weeks suddenly rearranged itself. The affair wasn't just immoral. Someone's health had been placed at risk. Claire immediately shook her head. "I don't know whether he disclosed his status to your wife." "You think he didn't?" "I know my son." The shame in her voice sounded genuine. "He avoids difficult conversations until they're impossible to avoid." She pushed the folder toward me. Inside were printed emails. Not medical records. Emails between Claire and Elijah. One of them read. Asterisk, "You have no right involving another woman unless she knows everything." Asterisk. Another said. Asterisk, "Please tell me you've informed her." Asterisk. His response was only one sentence. Asterisk, "Mom, stop trying to control my life." Asterisk. No mention that he had actually told Vanessa. No denial either. Just avoidance. It was enough to make my stomach tighten. "I didn't come here because I hate my son," Claire said. "I came because if your wife doesn't know." She couldn't finish the sentence. I quietly closed the folder. Thank you. I almost stayed silent. You didn't. I couldn't. For the first time in weeks, I felt sympathy for someone connected to Elijah. Claire wasn't protecting him. She was trying to stop innocent people from paying for his decisions. Before leaving, she stopped beside my office door. I don't expect forgiveness. I wasn't planning on giving it. She nodded sadly. I wasn't asking. After she left, I called Marlene immediately. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she spoke very carefully. Mark, you need to be extremely cautious. I know. You cannot publicly accuse anyone of having HIV without admissible evidence. I understand. You also cannot obtain or disclose confidential medical information illegally. I'm not going to. What you can do is continue documenting everything and protect yourself legally. That conversation grounded me again. Emotion wanted me to explode. The law demanded patience. Patience had gotten me this far. It would carry me the rest of the way. 3 evenings later, Vanessa came home unusually upset. She barely touched dinner. She checked her phone every few minutes. Finally she stood up. I'm going for a drive. It can wait until tomorrow. It can't. She grabbed her keys and left. I followed 20 minutes later. She drove straight to Elijah's apartment. From across the street I watched through my camera lens as they argued outside the building. Their body language was completely different now. No kissing. No laughing. Vanessa was shouting. Elijah kept trying to calm her down. At one point she shoved him hard enough that he stumbled backward. He grabbed her wrist. She pulled away. Then I saw something that caught my attention. Vanessa reached into her purse, pulled out several folded papers, and threw them into his chest. He looked at the pages for only a second before his face turned completely white. Even from half a block away I could see it. Whatever those papers were. They had terrified him. He chased after Vanessa as she drove away, but she never looked back. The next morning, while reviewing the synchronized messages on the forgotten tablet, I finally understood why. At 8:17 p.m. Just 30 minutes before their argument, Vanessa had sent Elijah only 4 words. We need to talk. Asterisk asterisk. His reply came almost immediately. About the test? Asterisk asterisk. Vanessa answered. Don't lie to me anymore. Asterisk asterisk. Then, for the first time since I had started collecting evidence, their conversation stopped completely. No messages. No calls. No explanations. Only silence. And somehow, that silence frightened me far more than anything they had ever written to each other. Silence can be louder than screaming. For almost 9 days, the tablet remained completely quiet. No messages. No late-night voice notes. No heart emojis. Nothing. The woman who had spent 7 months texting Elijah every hour suddenly behaved as though he no longer existed. At first I assumed they had simply moved their conversation somewhere else. A different messaging app. Burner phones. Anything. But then Vanessa herself began changing. She wasn't happier. She wasn't relieved. She looked terrified. She stopped wearing makeup to work. She barely ate. Twice I found untouched dinners sitting in the refrigerator after she claimed she wasn't hungry. One night she woke up crying. Not loudly. Just enough for me to hear quiet sobs beside me in the darkness. She didn't know I was awake. She whispered one sentence into her pillow. What have I done? I didn't answer. I simply kept breathing as if I were asleep. If you've ever wondered whether watching someone who betrayed you suffer brings instant satisfaction, let me tell you something that surprised me. It doesn't. Not immediately. At first it simply confirms that reality has finally caught up with them. The guilt, the fear, the consequences, they eventually arrive whether you help them or not. The following Friday I received another call from Claire. Can we meet again? We met at a small coffee shop near Golden Gate Park. She looked even more exhausted than before. I shouldn't know this, she admitted quietly, but Elijah finally told me. Told you what? He never informed your wife. I said nothing. He admitted she found out after she became sick. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. He confessed they argued because she demanded to know why her doctor wanted additional blood work. Claire's hands shook around the paper cup. She received the diagnosis 3 days ago. There it was. The answer. Vanessa hadn't discovered the truth because Elijah had done the right thing. She had discovered it because her own doctors had begun asking questions. Claire closed her eyes. My son admitted he kept telling himself he'd explain later. Later never came. No. She swallowed. He said every week it became harder to confess because he knew she'd leave. I looked out the cafe window. Parents pushed strollers through the park. Tourists laughed while taking pictures. The world kept moving exactly as it always had. Funny how ordinary life refuses to pause while yours falls apart. I appreciate you telling me. I owed you that. No, I answered quietly. You owed me nothing. She began crying. I failed him. You didn't choose for him. She nodded without believing me. Before leaving she reached across the table. I'm sorry your life became tangled with ours. So am I. That was the last time I ever saw Claire. Back at my office, Marlene already had nearly everything prepared. The divorce petition. Financial exhibits. Bank documentation. Property valuations. Evidence of marital funds spent on the affair. Photographs. Hotel receipts. Apartment applications. Everything. There is only one question left, she said. When do you want her served? I looked at the calendar. Our wedding anniversary was 12 days away. I smiled for the first time in weeks. That morning. Marlene raised one eyebrow. You've been very patient. I learned patience from Vanessa. She almost smiled. For the next 12 days I became the perfect husband. I booked dinner at the restaurant where I had proposed 8 years earlier. I bought flowers. I even suggested we spend a weekend in Napa afterward. Vanessa looked confused by my sudden enthusiasm. Almost guilty. Almost. You've been really sweet lately, she said one evening. I've been thinking. About what? About us. She stared at me for several long seconds. Then she looked away. I've been thinking too. I know. She had no idea how true those words were. The anniversary morning arrived bright and unusually warm for San Francisco. Vanessa kissed me before leaving for work. I'll see you tonight. I wouldn't miss it. At exactly 10:07 a.m., while she was walking into the furniture showroom, a professional process server handed her a large envelope. I didn't witness it. I didn't need to. Marlene called me 20 minutes later. She's been served. What happened? The server said she looked completely stunned. Good. Less than 5 minutes later my phone began vibrating. Vanessa. I ignored it. Again. Ignored. Again. Ignored. 31 missed calls. 12 text messages. Mark, please answer. What is this? Please tell me this is some mistake. Can we talk? Please. Please. Nothing. At exactly noon I changed every password connected exclusively to my business. The joint accounts had already been protected through legal channels. My paycheck now went into my new account. Every document had been filed. Every signature completed. Every loose end tied. By the time Vanessa understood what was happening, there was nothing left for her to control. Around 6 that evening I arrived at the restaurant anyway. Our reservation remained exactly as planned. The hostess smiled. "Your wife called. She cancelled." "I know. I've reserved your table regardless." "Perfect." I sat alone by the window overlooking the bay. Ordered the best steak on the menu. A glass of red wine. Dessert. Not because I was celebrating. Because I was closing a chapter exactly where it had begun. Halfway through dinner my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Vanessa. It was her father. Richard. A retired firefighter. One of the most respected men I'd ever known. I answered. "Hello." His voice sounded older than I remembered. "Mark." "Yes." "Vanessa finally told us everything." I waited. There was a long silence. Then he asked quietly. "Is it true?" "What part?" "The affair." "Yes." "The money?" "Yes." "The apartment?" "Yes." He inhaled slowly. Then came the sentence I never expected to hear. "I've never been more ashamed of my daughter." Those words landed with far more weight than any scream ever could. Richard continued. "Your mother-in-law is devastated." "I'm sorry." "No." His voice hardened. "Don't apologize for something you didn't do." He paused. "She also told us about the diagnosis." I remained silent. We asked whether the young man had warned her. And he didn't. Richard sounded sick. "Mark, we've supported Vanessa her entire life." Another pause. "But we can't stand behind this. If you've ever been betrayed, you know there comes a point when people stop asking who was right. They start asking who remained honorable after everything collapsed. That distinction matters more than revenge." Richard cleared his throat. "I hope someday you can forgive us for raising someone capable of this." I looked out across the water where the sun was beginning to disappear behind the Golden Gate Bridge. "There isn't anything for me to forgive you for." He thanked me. Quietly. Then he hung up. I placed my phone face down on the table. The evening sky had turned orange. My marriage had officially ended. But Vanessa's collapse was only beginning. The divorce process moved much faster than Vanessa expected. That was the first consequence of underestimating someone she'd spent years calling too predictable. Predictable people keep records. Predictable people pay attention. Predictable people don't make emotional decisions that destroy their own future. For the first week after she was served, Vanessa called constantly. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she screamed. Sometimes she switched between both within the same voicemail. "Mark, please, we need to talk." Then another. "You've blown this completely out of proportion." Another. "You owe me at least one conversation." By the end of the second week the messages became desperate. "I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I'll end everything. I'll do counseling." I never answered. Every communication went directly to Marlene. That silence hurt her far more than any argument ever could. One afternoon my attorney called. "I think you'll want to hear this." "I'm listening." "Vanessa finally hired counsel. And they're asking whether you're willing to negotiate before discovery." I smiled. There isn't much left to negotiate. There really wasn't. Every financial transfer. Every hotel reservation. Every apartment application. Every dollar taken from our joint savings. Everything had already been documented. Their side wasn't fighting facts. They were fighting consequences. A month later discovery officially began. That was when another truth surfaced. Elijah hadn't only accepted Vanessa's money. He had accepted money from at least 3 other women over the previous 2 years. Different cities. Different stories. Different promises. Each relationship followed almost the exact same pattern. Charm. Attention. Dreams about a future together. Then requests for financial help. One woman had paid for camera equipment. Another had helped cover rent. Vanessa had unknowingly become the largest contributor. Nearly $30,000. When Marlene showed me the investigator's supplemental report, she quietly said, "He wasn't looking for love. He was looking for sponsors." For several minutes I simply stared at the documents. Vanessa had destroyed our marriage believing she was choosing passion over routine. Instead, she had become another victim in a long-running manipulation. If you've ever been betrayed, here's something worth remembering. The fantasy people leave you for usually isn't real. It's carefully constructed. Affairs survive because reality hasn't entered the room yet. Eventually it always does. 3 weeks later the final blow landed. Elijah disappeared. He emptied his apartment. Changed his phone number. Closed his photography website. Vanished. He left Vanessa with unpaid lease commitments she had co-signed, thousands of dollars she would never recover, and absolutely no intention of building the future he'd promised. She tried finding him. Friends stopped answering. Former clients hadn't seen him. Even social media accounts disappeared. The young man she believed had chosen her had simply moved on to the next opportunity. Vanessa broke. She requested mediation. Not because she suddenly wanted to save the marriage. Because she finally understood she had lost everything. At mediation she looked nothing like the confident woman I'd followed to that hotel months earlier. She had lost weight. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Her shoulders seemed permanently slumped. For almost 15 minutes she said nothing. Then she looked directly at me. "I loved you." I met her eyes calmly. "No. You loved what I provided." Tears immediately filled her eyes. I was confused. "You planned an apartment." Silence. I wasn't thinking. "You transferred almost $30,000. Silence again. I don't know why I became that person. For the first time since this nightmare began, I actually believed she was telling the truth. Not because she was innocent. Because she genuinely couldn't explain how gradually crossing one line after another had turned her into someone she no longer recognized. But understanding isn't the same thing as undoing. Marlene slid the settlement documents across the table. The financial adjustments reflected every documented misuse of marital assets that could legally be addressed. The house would be sold. The remaining equity divided according to the agreement. Several financial claims were offset because of the documented spending connected to the affair. Everything had been calculated carefully. Nothing excessive. Nothing theatrical. Just consequences. Vanessa signed last. Before standing, she whispered, "I never thought you'd become this cold." I answered quietly, "I didn't. I became careful." She lowered her head. That was the last conversation we ever had. A few weeks later I heard from Richard one final time. "Can we have dinner?" We met at a small seafood restaurant overlooking the water. He looked older than I remembered. "So does my wife," he admitted. "This has destroyed our family." He paused. "We told Vanessa she needs to rebuild her life on her own. You cut her off. We stopped rescuing her." He stirred his coffee slowly. "She kept asking everyone else to fix the consequences of her choices." He looked at me. "We won't do that anymore." His voice carried disappointment rather than anger. Our daughter needs to become accountable before anyone can truly help her. He reached across the table. I also wanted to tell you something. I waited. I've watched how you've handled this. No public humiliation. No revenge online. No attempts to destroy anyone outside the legal process. He smiled faintly. People in our family talk about you now. I frowned. What do they say? They say if they're ever faced with betrayal, they hope they have your self-control. I didn't know how to respond. Because the truth was, there had been nights when I'd wanted to burn every bridge. Expose every message. Embarrass everyone involved. But those impulses pass. Consequences built patiently tend to last much longer than explosions fueled by anger. 6 months later the divorce became final. I sold the old house. Bought a smaller place overlooking the northern edge of San Francisco. Started running every morning before work. Expanded my structural inspection business. Within a year I'd hired 3 additional engineers. Revenue nearly doubled. The strange part wasn't the financial success. It was the peace. For the first time in years I no longer wondered whether someone sitting across the dinner table was telling me the truth. Life became quieter. Cleaner. Lighter. People occasionally asked why I never publicly shared the evidence. The answer was simple. I never wanted revenge to become my identity. Justice had already done everything revenge couldn't. Looking back now, I don't remember the affair as the event that ruined my life. I remember it as the event that forced me to build a better one. 1. When someone repeatedly lies, don't argue with the words, pay attention to the pattern of actions. 2. Anger fades quickly. Careful decisions protect you long after emotions disappear. 3. Never sacrifice your dignity just to win one dramatic moment. Quiet preparation often changes your future more than loud confrontation. 4. Don't confuse accountability with cruelty. Holding someone responsible for their own choices isn't revenge, it's reality. If you made it this far, tell me what you would have done. Comment 1 if you would have confronted Vanessa the first night, 2 if you would have stayed silent and gathered evidence like I did, or 3 if you think there was another better path. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional situations and completely rewritten in San Francisco to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or actual events is purely coincidental.